Good day everyone! So good day na lang po ang sasabihin ko because I don't really know kung kailan nyo ipi-play itong video nito. Pwede pong umaga, pwedeng tanghali, at pwede rin pong gabi. By the way, my name is Mark Ian A. Villado and I will be your computer teacher for this school year. So most of you, I believe, most of you know me already kasi nga po ako po yung naging computer teacher ninyo when you were in grade 7. Ngayon, kung sakaling hindi mo ako kilala, ibig sabihin you are a transferee student last school year or you are a transferee student this school year. So, bakit ko nga ba ginawa itong video nito? So, the reason why I make this video is that I just want to clarify or to discuss to you the phases of database planning and design, which is yun po yung lesson natin nung week number 3, day number 2. So, babalikan lang natin saglit yung week number 3, day number 2. Kasi nga po yung answer po ng iba sa inyo dun sa activity ng week number 3, day number 2 ay ang inilagay nilang answer is a record. Reminder, nakalagay po sa instruction that you're going to break down the field name. So, ibig sabihin, pag break down nyo yung field name, dapat field name pa rin siya. So, kumbaga, ang isang bato, pag binitak po natin ang isang bato or gagawin natin, bibitakin natin yung isang bato para maging maliit or para dumami siya, dapat bato pa rin po siya. Kaya lang, yung ginawa po ninyo, i-break down nyo yung field name, pero at the end of the result, naging record na po siya. So, reminder, malaki po ang pagkakaiba po ng record sa field name. So, into this video, i-discuss po natin kung ano ang pagkakaiba ng record at saka field name at kung paano po ba siya dapat i-break down. Okay? Now, dun sa output ninyo sa week number 1 at week number 2, wala na po akong i-comment doon kasi most of you or all of you understand the week number 1 at week number 2. That's why, ngayon lang po ako send ng video kasi nga po yung sagot po natin sa week number 3, day number 2, yung iba sa inyo is medyo nagkalito-lito or na-confuse kung anong ilalagay na sagot sa week number 3, day number 2 na activity. Okay? So, kung sakaling tapos nyo na yung week number 3, day number 2, nakapag-submit na kayo sa akin, then pwede nyo pa rin po siyang baguhin. Okay, pag natapos nyo ng panoorin itong video ito at naintindihan nyo na kung ano po yung tamang sagot dun sa activity na yon, then nakita nyo na mali yung inilagay ninyong sagot, pwede nyo na po siyang itama, then send it to me again. I'm going to give consideration into that one. Pero kung sakaling hindi pa po kayo tapos sa week number 3 at hindi nyo pa po nagagawa yung week number 3 at gagawin nyo pa lang yung week number 3, day number 2, then you still have a chance para yung isasubmit nyo sa aking output is magiging tama na po siya. Okay? So, magiging correct na po yung output po natin. Kasi nga, mahirap naman po magkaroon ng 0 na score. So, I don't like to give you or ayoko magbigay ng score na 0. So, as much as possible, wala po sana mazi-0. Pwede pong mabawasan yung score pero wag po sana tayong umabot sa 0. So, yun lang po. Continue watching this video and continue watching this video and finish this discussion in order for you to understand how are you going to break down the following field names. And I'm going also to discuss to you the first phase of database planning and design. Okay? Kasi bakit kailangan nyo maintindihan yung day number 2 or week number 3, day number 2? Kasi yun na po doon na po tayo mag-uumpisa na gumawa ng database system or database. Doon na po tayo magsisimulang gumawa ng database system up to the end of this school year. Ngayon, kung hindi nyo po naintindihan yung week number 3, day number 2, ibig sabihin magkakaroon po tayo ng problema as we go on. Kasi habang tumatagal po siya, lagi po natin gagamitin ang field name. Ngayon, kung umabot tayo ng 4th quarter at hindi nyo pa rin po maintindihan kung anong pagkakaiba ng field name and record, then magkakaroon po tayo ng problem dun sa final output nyo. Kasi dun sa final output nyo, magkaka-connect yun starting this one up to the end. So, dapat at the end of the school year, makagawa kayo ng simple system using the Microsoft Office Access only. So, simple system lang that can store, view, and calculate information using the database system. So, yun lang po. So, let's start the database planning and design, or the phases of database planning and design. So in order for us to start our discussion, supposed to be you're going to answer this simple game, which is the what we call the 4 picks 1 word. So usually into this 4 picture, ano sa tingin ninyo ang magiging sagot niyan? Okay. So ang magiging sagot na po niyan based on the 4 picture. So ang pinapakita lang naman po ng 4 na picture is they are going to teach. So, ibig sabihin, ang magiging sagot po niyan is a teacher. Okay, teacher. Now, next. Next item. Okay. So, based on the 4 picture, ano kayo magiging sagot niyan? Okay. So, that is now what we call engineer. Okay, the next or last. Okay, based on the 4 picture again, ano kaya magiging sagot ulit niyan? Okay, so that is now the architect. Okay. Now, so, sinabi ko kanina or sinabi natin kanina yung teacher, may pinakita ako or ang sagot natin dun sa ating game is a teacher, merong teacher, merong engineer, at meron din pong architect. Now, bakit ko or anong relation sa database system itong teacher, engineer, and architect? So, simple lang po. Si teacher may pinoproduce na output. Si engineer may pinoproduce na output. And of course, si architect ay may pinoproduce na output. So, ang ipinoproduce ni teacher, para makapag-establish siya ng teaching and learning process na maayos, ang pinoproduce niya muna, bago pumasok sa classroom, dapat meron siyang lesson plan. And of course, ang pinoproduce naman ni engineer bago siya makagawa ng isang napakagandang bahay is dapat meron siyang, ano yung hawak niya? Mga papel? Char. Siyempre, hindi po siya mga papel. So, dapat meron po siyang blueprint. Okay? Blueprint ang pinoproduce ni engineer. How about architect? Anong hawak ni architect? Of course, hindi po bahay. Hindi niya pinoproduce yung figurine na bahay. So, reminder, ang pinoproduce naman ni architect is the design of the house. So, design. So, design kay architect. So, kay teacher, plan. And of course, kay engineer, blueprint. And of course, kay architect ay design. So, anong connection yan sa database system? So, as you can see, kung si teacher ay plan, at si engineer ay blueprint, and of course, si architect ay design. So, bilang isang computer programmer or bilang isang database programmer, so we are a database programmer. As a database programmer, ano sa tingin ninyo ang ipoproduce naman natin? Okay, so ang ipoproduce naman natin bilang isang database programmer is a plan. We need to produce a plan. Aside from producing a plan, we are going to produce also a blueprint. So, gagawa tayo ng blueprint of our database. Then, aside from the blueprint, final will be the design of our database. So, ito na po yung system ng ating database or yung final output ng ating database. And reminder, at the end of the school year, dapat meron kayong maipoproduce na simple system that can store, it can view, and it can calculate information na system. So, yun po yung final output nyo po sa akin. So, that will be design. Okay? So, plan, blueprint, and design. So, that is now in connection with database planning and design. So, in database planning and design, we have three phases. First phase will be the data definition. And second phase will be the data refinement. And the third phase will be the establishing of relationship. And that is now what we call the database structure. Pag nakompleto na natin yung tatlong yan, nagawa na natin yung tatlong yan, Ang tawag na po natin dyan is a database structure kasi buong-buo na yung ating database. Okay? So, from the word itself, data definition, we're going to define the information that we need. Then, from the word itself, data refinement, from the word define, we are going to modify or to refine or isaayos yung ating information na na-define. Then, after that, we are going to establish its relationship. Ano nga ba yung mga pagkaka-relate ng mga iba't ibang information na na-gather natin at na-refine natin. Okay? So, we are going to discuss those three one by one. So, first one, we're going to discuss first the data definition. So, ano nga ba ang gagawin natin on the data definition? So, here are the steps. So, we are going to discuss first the data definition. Huwag muna tayong mag-proceed dun sa data refinement and establishing relationship. Don't worry, I'm going to send you more videos on data refinement and establishing of relationship because data refinement and establishing relationship is also confusing. So, dun muna tayo sa data definition. So, data definition, we have here the first step. So, sabi dun sa first step natin, we are going to determine the purpose of the database. So, we're going to determine the purpose of the database from the word we're going to determine the purpose of the database. It is now the time that we are going to identify our objective. Okay? Objective. So, how are we going to identify the purpose of our database? Ano nga ba yung reason? Bakit kailangan natin gumawa ng database na ganito? Ano nga ba yung reason? Bakit kailangan natin gawin tong database na to? Reminder, we're not just going to create a database. Okay? Gagawa tayo ng database with a purpose po siya. Hindi siya basta-bastang ginagawa. Okay? So now, how are we going to create our database or determine the following purpose? Of course, with the help of the different guide question. Okay, for the first guide question, what data or information are needed into our database? Ano nga ba yung mga data or information na kailangan natin para sa ating database? Okay? So, we're going to determine that. Don't worry, I'm going to give an example later on. Okay? And of course, who will use the database? Sino nga ba ang gagamit ng ating database? Okay? Then next, what will the user enter? Or what information will the user should enter into our database? So, ano nga ba ang mga information na ilalagay ng ating mga user sa ating database? Okay? So, using those guide question, we can now be able to identify the purpose or our objective for our database. We can now identify the purpose of our database. Okay? Ay, meron pa pala. What kind of output should the database produce? So, dapat ba yung ating database, nakakapag-print din po ba siya ng information? Nakakapag-view po ba siya ng information? So, anong mga output ang pwedeng i-produce ng ating database? Okay? So, now, let us construct our purpose or let us construct the purpose of our database. Now, for example, we are going to create a student information system. So, student information system, and here are our guide question. So, meron na akong ginawa dito, mga objective or purpose ng ating student information system. So, ito yung system na gagamitin natin or ito yung system na gagawin natin. So, for the student information system, we have here the first guide question. So, it says here, what data or information are needed for the database? So, we constructed in here our objective number 1 or objective number 1 is to store and display records of students' personal information. So, what kind of information are needed for the database? So, ito na ngayon si personal information. So, which means, if you're going to create an objective for your database, you need to specify what kind of information are you going to collect. So, hindi naman po pwedeng store and display records of students. So, pwede rin. Records of students. So, ang information na i-collect na natin or ang magiging sagot or kung wala tayong personal information dyan, let's say for example, wala tayong personal information. So, ang inalagay nyo lang is to store and display records of students. So, tama pa rin siya. What data or information are needed for the database? So, records. Kaya lang, anong klaseng record? Anong klaseng record po ang i-collect natin dyan? So, hindi natin alam. So, anong klaseng record? Paano kung ang ibinigay sa iyo ng estudyante ay yung ID lang? That is still a record. Pero hindi niya binigay yung name niya, hindi niya binigay yung birthday niya. So, wala kang magagawa doon. Kasi ang sabi mo lang sa purpose is record. So, paano pag nilagyan mo ng personal information? So, that's the time now na pwede mong i-collect yung personal information ng ating students. Kasi students ng ating students. So, personal information yung i-collect natin. So, that's the time that we are going to collect her name or their name. We are going to collect their name. We're going to collect their birth date. We're going to collect their address. That is personal information. So, what kind of information are we going to collect? Personal information. So, that is our first objective. Now, second guide question. It says there, who will use the database? Did we answer the second guide question? Of course, yes. Who will use the database? The students. Okay? So, what will be or what information will the user enter into the database? So, anong information ang i-enter ng ating user sa ating database? So, ito na yung sinasabi ko. What kind of information? So, anong klaseng information yung i-enter ni user sa ating database? Okay? So, anong klaseng information? That is now the personal information. That's why you need to specify what kind of information you are going to collect from the user or from a certain person or from a certain object. Okay, then lastly, what kind of output should the database will produce? So, ano nga bang output ang ipoproduce ni database dito sa first objective natin? So, usually, ang magiging first output or magiging output na ipoproduce ng ating database is no other than the personal information. Kasi nakalagay naman dito, display records. So, display records, what kind of record? Personal information. So, from the word display, ipoproduce ba niya? I-view ba niya? Yes. I-view po niya through the computer screen. Kasi, from the word itself, display. Okay, so what kind of output should the database will produce? Okay, now let's proceed naman on the objective number 2. So it says here, store and display records of the students. O, tignan nyo, ibang information naman ito. Subject information. So what kind of information are we going to collect? Subject information. Who will use the database? The student. Okay, then what kind of or what information should the user enter into our database? Subject information. Then what kind of output should the database will produce? Subject information kasi merong nakalagay dyan na display. Okay? Display. The same as to the third objective, store and display each student's teacher's name. So, anong klaseng information ang i-collect natin? Student's teacher's name. Okay? Then, other than that, we're going to display students' teacher's name. Who will use the database? See, students and teacher. Okay? Students or teachers. Kasi we're going to enter the students and teachers' name. Hindi lang po si students, pero pati po si teacher. Okay? So, that is now the purpose of our database. Okay? So, that is an example, objective of determining the purpose of our database. So, kung mapapansin, hindi lang po basta-basta gumagawa ng database. Hindi po pwedeng gumawa ka ng database pero walang purpose. Reminder, lahat po ng mga ginagawa po natin sa computer subject, all of them has a purpose. Okay? Now, that will be your objective. Let us maintain that objective. Then, let us go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Then, let's continue. After determining the different or after determining the purpose of our database or after constructing our objective, what will be the next step? So, dyan na po papasok ang ating field names. So, we are now going to determine the different field names that is needed for our database. So, we have now our objective. And based on our objective, malalaman po natin kung ano po ang magiging field names. Based on the objective or based on the purpose of our database, malalaman natin kung ano ang magiging field names ng ating database. So, napaka-importante talaga ng purpose or objective of our database. Okay, so how are we going to identify the different field names? So, think of a piece of data that pertains to a certain person or object. So, in other term or in other words, in determining the field names of our database, pag sinabi natin field names, it means field names is describing our record. So, let's say for example, ang field names natin or ang record natin is our name. So, let's say for example, ang record natin is yung pangalan ko na Mark Villedo. So, Mark Villedo is a record. The word Mark Villedo is a record. So, ano na ngayon ang magiging field name ng ating record? So, pwede pong maging field name ng ating record yung word na name. So, from the word itself, name. So, that is now a field name because the word name is describing Mark Villedo as a name. So, kung mapapansin nyo sa test paper nyo, pagka nag-e-exam kayo, we have their name dun sa tuktok. Then, after name, we have also section. So, pag name, tapos may nakita kayong blank, anong ilalagay nyo dun sa blank? Of course, you're going to put your name. So, your name is a record. Yung name is a field name. So, name is describing now the record. So, hindi naman po pwedeng ilagay ninyo yung section ninyo dun sa name. Okay? So, name is describing or a piece of data that is describing our record. So, how are we going to identify our field names? For example, kung sabi ko nga kanina, we're going to create a student information and based on our objective, we're going to construct our field name or identify our field name. So, from the word itself is student information, we can now identify our field name or first field name as a student name. So, our first objective is that we are going to store and display personal information of the student. So, from the word itself, na store and display information of the student, which means you're going to store personal information of the student. So, yung name ba ay personal information ng student? Of course, yes. So, we are going to put their student name. After student name, we're also going to put their student address. After student address, we have also phone number. So, those are personal information of students. Or example, personal information of students. Now, let's say for example, na-identify na natin lahat-lahat ng field names for our database. Na-identify na natin silang lahat. Meron na tayong name, meron na tayong address, meron na tayong phone number, and meron na tayong mobile number, and so on and so forth. So, pag mag-identify kayo ng field name, all you have to do is to write kung ano man yung maisip ninyong personal information or subject information na pwede. Okay? Kasi, pupunta pa rin naman tayo sa field definition principle. Okay? On the field definition principle, isa lang ang gagawin natin sa field definition principle. We are going to break down the field name into smaller parts. So, ito na yung activity na ginawa ng ibang estudyante or ibang grade 9 students na ginawa na nila. Pero kung sakaling hindi nyo pa nagawa, then you still have a chance para masagutan na maayos yung inyong activity. So, in breaking down the field name into smaller parts, ibig sabihin, hahati-hatiin natin yung field name. So, let's say for example, yung first one, ito, student name. Student name. If we're going to break down the student name, meron bang part or iba't ibang part ang ating name bilang isang estudyante. So, meron bang iba't ibang part as a student yung inyong pangalan? Of course, meron. So, nandyan si last name, first name, and middle initial. So, if you're going to break down the student name, magiging last name, first name, and middle initial. And of course, if you're going to break down also the address, pag i-break down natin si address, magiging street, barangay, municipality, city, province, country, zip code, and so on. Okay? So, yun po si address. Pag i-breakdown naman po natin yung phone number, we need to ask ourselves, pwede bang i-breakdown si phone number? Ilan ba ang parts ng phone number? Isa lang. So, ibig sabihin, hindi natin pwedeng i-breakdown si phone number. How about section? Pwede ba natin i-breakdown si section? Ilan ba ang parts ng section? Isa lang din. So, ibig sabihin, hindi natin pwedeng i-breakdown si section. So, pwede natin palitan yung pangalan ng section, which is grade and section. Pwede rin naman ganon. Pwede rin naman na section name. O di kaya section number. Ganon. Kaya lang, hindi natin siya pwedeng i-breakdown into smaller parts kasi iisang part lang naman si section. Unlike on the name, na it has 3 parts, sometimes it has 4 parts kasi yung junior, the second, the third, or yung suffix natin. So, meron dyan first name, last name, and middle initial, then the suffix. So, unlike on the address also, na merong street, barangay, municipality, and province. So, parang ganun. So, you need to think or you need to ask yourself also kung pwede bang i-breakdown si field names or kung hindi ba siya pwedeng i-breakdown. Okay? So, yun lang naman yung pagbe-breakdown ng ating field name. Pero, what is the reason why we need to break down the following field name? Ano nga ba yung rason bakit kailangan nating i-breakdown yung field name? Bakit kailangan i-breakdown yung field name? Tama naman na yung name. Tama naman na yung address. Tama naman na yung phone number. Imposible namang ilalagay pa nila yung section nila sa address. Posible namang ilalagay nila yung section nila sa name. So, tama naman silang lahat. Bakit kailangan natin kaya i-breakdown yung field name? Okay. So, this is the reason why we need to break down the following field name into smaller parts. Number 1, or example. Meron tayo dito ang finished product na database at meron siyang search engine. So, gagawa tayo later on ng search engine. So, yung database natin, example, yung search engine, meron siyang search engine. Kaya lang yung database natin, hindi natin break down yung mga field names natin into smaller parts. So, let's say, for example, hindi natin break down. So, yung student name lang siya. Hindi siya na-breakdown into last name, first name, and middle initial. So, hindi siya na-breakdown. So, name lang siya. So, kung name, big sabihin, nilalagay nila doon yung apelyido, pangalan, and middle initial. Ganun yung format. Pwede rin naman na pangalan, middle initial, apelyido. Parang ganon. So, it's up to them. Basta pangalan. Okay? So, now, ganon yung output ng ating database. Then, yung user, nag-search siya ng last name. Which is, last name lang ang alam niya. Hindi niya alam yung apelyido. Hindi niya alam yung pangalan, I should say. Hindi niya alam yung pangalan. Hindi niya, ang alam niya lang is last name. Okay? Tapos, pag nakita niya yung birth date, then, malalaman niya kung siya yung sinesearch niya. So, ang alam lang talaga niya is birth date and last name. Kaya lang yung search engine natin, doon lang siya nakapag-focus sa name. So, ang alam lang niya is last name. Pag clinic niya yung search, ito ang magpapakita na result. Okay. Now, as you can see, into the student name field name, lalabas, once I click search, lalabas si John Smith, lalabas si Richard Smith, lalabas si Joe Smith. Kaya lang, bakit lumabas si Tony Richardson? Bakit siya lumabas? Bakit din lumabas si Gray O'Donnell? Wala naman silang Smith. Bakit lumabas si Tim Smith? Reminder, kung yung field names natin, hindi nila or yung search engine natin sa database, hindi niya ma-search yung mismong word, ilalabas na lahat ng records. Kung hindi naman ilalabas lahat ng records, ipapakita niya itong result is equal to 0 records found. Bakit 0 records found? Kasi ito lang yung hinahanap mo. Pero hindi niya mahanap yung eksaktong ito. Buti sana kung itong John ay wala at ang nakalagay lang ay Smith. So, masasearch niya itong record na to kung wala yung John. Pero, meron si John. Kasi nga, nakalagay sa field names natin, student name. Okay? So, that is the reason why we need to break down the following field name para kung sakaling we are going to search or we are going to create our search engine, then yung user natin ay magsa-search ng as particular record which is last name lang yung alam niya o di kaya first name lang yung alam niya, masa-search niya yung exact na first name together with their records. So, Smith, madaming Smith, pero wala siyang mahanapan na saktong Smith. Wala siyang mahanapan na saktong Smith, kaya lang yung records kasi natin merong John, merong Richard. Kung walang John at walang Richard at walang Joe, papakita niya itong tatlo. Pero, hindi nga na-breakdown. So, that's why 0 record found. Okay? So, hindi na-breakdown na nilagay ng mga user sa ating database ay yung kompletong pangalan niya. Okay? So, that is the reason behind why do we need to establish or why do we need to break down the following field name. Okay? As a summary, database planning and design, first step, we're going to plan. Create a plan. We're going to determine to plan. First step in planning, we need to determine the purpose of our database using the different guide question or using the guide questions. Okay? Then, second, after we identify the purpose of our database, based on our objective or based dun sa na-identify nating objective, we're now going to identify the field name. Okay? Then now, next, after that, after identifying the field name, then, we are going to break it down into a smaller part. Okay? Then, lastly, magkaiba po si record at saka si field name. Pag sinabi nating record, ito po yung pwede nating kunin sa isang ito yung pwede nating kunin sa isang okay. Sorry na-interrupt yung video natin kasi nga nalobat yung camera and nalobat yung camera. Okay. Now, so as I was saying, magkaiba po si record at si field names kasi ang record ay ito yung makukuha natin sa a certain person or a certain object. So ito yung makukuha natin. Let's say for example, yung mga pangalan nila, yung mga birth date nila and so on and so on. Now, birth date nila and so on. So field names naman, it is describing the record. It is describing the record. Let's say for example, yung pangalan ko, Mark Bilyado. Mark Bilyado is the record. Now, the field name is yung ilalagay nating name. So, name is, the word name is describing now the record which is the Mark Bilyado. Okay, so as a summary, so we have here the different field names that is applicable in breaking down into smaller parts. And of course, we have here also the reason. So, we have here the original field name, then the new field name which is the breakdown or yung na-breakdown na natin, and that is now the new field name, and the reason why kung bakit siya breakdown. Okay, so the reason why kung bakit siya breakdown. So we have here the student name, na-breakdown siya into last name, first name, and middle name, and of course the street address, na-breakdown siya sa street, city, pero pwede nyo pang dagdagan yan, pwede nyo pang lagyan ng barangay, municipality, province, country, and so on and so forth. So, meron pang phone number. Pero question, ang phone number ba pwede ba natin i-breakdown? Of course, hindi. Kasi isang part lang naman si phone number. So, that is still phone number. Then next, teachers, which is teacher name, subject taught. Pero yung teacher name, pwede nyo pa rin i-breakdown yun. So, teacher's last name, teacher's first name, then subject taught. So, parang ganon. Then next, advisor name or advisor. Pag binake down natin, pwede maging advisor name. Pero pwede pa rin siyang i-break down into smaller parts, which is the advisor name. Pwede pa rin siyang maging advisor's last name, advisor's first name, and advisor's middle name. Okay? The next, the subject. Okay, subject name. Pwede bang i-break down si subject name? Hindi na. Kasi pag sinabi natin subject name, ang magiging record na niyan is English, Math, Filipino, Social Studies, Computer, TLE, and so on and so forth. So, subject name lang talaga siya. Then, subject grade. Pwede bang i-break down sa subject grade? Actually, pwede pa i-break down sa subject grade. Bakit? Si subject grade, ilang parts ang meron kay subject grade? Ilang parts? 4. Okay, so si first grading, second grading, fourth grading, and third grading, then fourth grading, then meron pang average. So, pwede pang maging 5. Okay, so that is the subject grade. Kaya lang, nandyan naman na si average, so average, not change. How about the level? Pag sinabi nating level, hindi ito yung level 1, level 2, level 3. Pag sinabi nating level, the grade level. Okay, so ito yung grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and so on and so forth. Pwede ba siyang i-break down? Of course, no. Then section lang siya. Birthday. Pwede bang i-break down si birthday? Of course, pwede pa rin po. Magiging birth month, birthday, birth year. Okay, then how about your age? Ilang part ba ang meron kay age? Isa lang. So, hindi siya pwedeng i-break down. So, that is the field definition principle or the database planning and design. So, I hope yung mga nakapag-submit na po ng week 3, day number 2, ay maayos nyo po yung sagot ninyo. Make sure na hindi po record yung ilalagay ninyong sagot as breaking down of the following filming. Okay, so, yun lang siya. So, please revise or modify or go back to the activity 1 of week 3, day number 2. So, I hope naintindihan. Meron pa ba? Another. If you're going, kung mapapansin nyo dito, yung field names natin, wala siyang space. Okay, reminder, if you're going to create a field name, make sure na walang space and make sure that it is camel case format. Pag sinabi natin camel case format, each word should always start with a capital letter. Pero walang space. Okay, walang space. Let's say, for example, itong teacher name. So, yung first letter ng teacher ay naka-capital, which is the letter T. Walang space. Then, yung next word is name. So, naka-capital din yung letter N. Okay, so that is now what we call camel case. Bakit camel case? Kasi, para siyang back ng camel. Para siyang likod ng camel. So, that is now camel case. So, yun lang. If you have a question, don't hesitate to ask me. Don't hesitate to ask me through Messenger or through GC, through PM man yan, or GC. Pwede nyo rin po akong i-text kung sakaling alam nyo na kung ano ito yung number ko. So, yun lang po. Good luck into your activity. Good luck, God bless, huwag magpaka-stress, and stay safe, Louisians.